There's little in these wetlands just north of the Danube to suggest the range of scenic beauty this river will take you through. It runs past cultural monuments of startling uniqueness and along famous vineyards. Through idyllic summer fields and at the foot of mighty castles and ancient abbeys. And through all of this shimmers a turbulent geological past. This river leads the way to the very beginnings of the continent's civilization and to the power centers of Austria's ancient history. Even in early days, it was shaped by the needs of man. Yet in many places, this river has preserved its primeval nature. This is the Kamp, a river to be enjoyed with all our senses. For its first few miles, the Kamp is a slim rivulet meandering its way along forest edges. No wonder its name is derived from the Celtic word for bent. But the birth of this landscape dates back to an even deeper past. 350 million years down the line. The rough Waldviertel, the forest district, was then a tropical ocean. Back then, the peaks of the Veriskian Mountains, a system of ranges as mighty as today's Himalayas, towered above the sea. In the course of hundreds of millions of years, these mountains were torn by the movement of continental plates and eroded by the climate. In some places, hard rocks have resisted the forces of frost, water, and wind. These boulders were forged deep down below the Earth's surface. When magma rose through crevices in the Earth's crust, it gradually chilled and hardened. There was ample time for large crystals to form. This crystalline structure allowed these magmatic rocks to put up resistance against the elements. As monoliths, they still stand all over this landscape, while the softer rocks, in which they were once embedded, have long eroded away. These solid monuments rise above the gently undulating hills of Bohemia. Their solid bedrock, the so-called Bohemian mass, once formed the foundations of massive mountains that have since vanished. Erosion eats away at the rock, following cracks and fractures and eventually sculpting these characteristic granite towers. Sometimes consisting of delicately stacked boulders, these formations are called tors. Near its source, the Kamp is a slim and gentle rivulet. But just a few miles downstream, it turns into a furious cataract. But even the wild waters gushing between the granite blocks of Hell's Falls cannot change the overall quietness of the Kamp's upper reaches. Most of the Kamp is not white water. It's a warm, golden honey colour. Beneath a tranquil surface, unexpected powers can lay hidden. Along the Kamp's quiet stretches, people have harnessed the river's energy since early days. In an old water-driven forge in the village of Kamp, you can still see how the powers of water and fire were used to create basic iron tools. It's the almost alchemistic transformation of that metal which shrouded ancient blacksmiths in the mantle of magic, an aura that still remains today, says blacksmith Richard Höcker.
In meiner Heimatstadt, dort wo ich aufgewachsen bin, gab's noch einen alten Schmied, der
in his hometown, he says, there was an old blacksmith working in an underground forge, a dark place with flickering fires and glowing metal. The old man working with his grippers and nippers and hammers, powerful impressions that shaped his mind, Richard says. In ancient times, he says, blacksmiths were seen as magicians and shamans who spoke to the hard metal through the fire. Uncanny men whose art and craft were hardly understood.
Unheimliche Menschen eben, über deren Tun und Treiben kein Nachbar genau etwas weiß.
More and more power is added to the Kamp by some 630 small tributaries that flow into the main river. Their precise number is impossible to state. Some appear and others vanish in the course of a year, and some are so small that they've never been named. The biggest tributary meets the Kamp as it meanders near Rapottenstein. Here, the smaller and the greater Kamp join forces. When autumn sneaks up, the land around the Kamp can, for one last time, boast its abundance of life. Most nuts go to the winter storage, but you'll also have to eat now and then. The siege of winter will be long, and it will set in soon. Rapottenstein Castle was besieged many times, but never captured once. For almost 1,000 years since Rapotto von Könring had it built. When the fogs thicken in late autumn, strange things happen around the Kamp. This is a roundup. The men are driving carp through an almost drained pond. Right into a huge net. All along the Kamp, ponds are now drained and harvested. The men are hauling in thousands of fish. This is a heavy load. The catch is sorted right away. Younger fish will spend the winter in tanks. Next year, they will return to the pond. For the big fish, it's a one-way Christmas journey to the kitchens and tables of so many families. But not all ponds are drained for winter. Below the ice, life goes on even when it's cold above, which inspires an otter to visit now and then. Otters, though making a comeback in Austria, are still rare, and the damage they cause to fish farms is still tolerable. In the forest district, as this region is called, winters are harsh and long, and there's a lot of snow. In some years, it feels like an eternity until the chill gives way to warmer weather. The snowmelt swells the water levels along the Kamp's upper reaches. Now, the Ottenstein Reservoir can fill again. And when the water finally reaches the forest edge, it becomes clear why this lakeside has been named the Forest District Fjords. In some places on the reservoir bank, the Kamp has bared the geological strata under this landscape. Again, the large crystals of this rock are proof of a very slow cooling process deep down in the earth. When a mountain chain was formed 350 million years ago, these already solidified rocks underwent another metamorphosis. Their story can still be read in the microscopic crystal structure. In some places, the workings of these tectonic forces are even obvious to the naked eye. The wild movements of the Earth's crust also pounded and mixed together volcanic and sedimentary materials. The gneiss formations around Dobra are Austria's oldest rocks, an awe-inspiring 1.4 billion years old. This silicon marble is much younger, but has gone through a similarly turbulent phase in the Earth's history. In winter, Zwettl is the coldest town in Austria, with new chilly records just about every year. But now, the cold season is over, and sun-seeking visitors will not be disappointed. For many years, storks have been nesting on the roofs of Zwettl's famous Cistercian abbey. Further downstream, spring activities are already in full swing. But not all encounters are entirely pleasant. Badgers regard their territories as exclusive private property. In this case, the real estate is in a prime location with direct access to the river. But the river is considered the otter's realm, so border skirmishes are inevitable. The badger has made a clear statement. And obviously, the message has sunk in. After a rather passive winter, other residents are now also seen in action. A beaver will eat 1.5 kilos of fresh green per day. In sparse times, beavers survive on tree bark. Then they need to eat 3 times that weight. Like our fingernails, a beaver's teeth keep growing, with the front side of the tooth being extremely hard and the back rather soft. A beaver automatically sharpens his teeth by wearing them down on tree logs. Wherever the Kamp cuts through rocky heights, the forest district's unofficial heraldic bird finds ideal nesting sites. Until they can fly, young eagle owls stay on high, safe granite towers. As the days grow longer, the Kamp's valley's numerous cultural gems begin to glow in a flattering light. Greilenstein, a Renaissance castle, boasts a unique garden. In spring and summer, the Kamp Valley attracts visitors with its Festival of Gardens. All along the river there are masterpieces of gardening and landscaping. The abbey grounds of Altenburg have been designed to represent religious ideas. Father Michael Hüttl explains the basic concept of these gardens.
Wir haben uns bemüht, in diesem Garten der Religionen ein Konzilsdokument in Gartensprache umzusetzen.
The idea was to translate one document of the Church Council into a garden landscape, he says. In a garden you can encounter God's creation. In a world with increasingly interlinking cultures, there are various ways to search for God. The monks try also to listen to others and hope to discover new vantage points for their own way forward.
Anderen zuzuhören und vielleicht für die eigene Gottsuche neue Aussichtspunkte auch für unseren eigenen Weg zu finden. Das heißt schon in der Regel des heiligen Benedikt, ganz egal, wer immer du bist, komm
Father
her,
Michael quotes the
schau
rules of
selber,
St. Benedict.
finde selber
Whoever
deinen
you are,
Platz, finde
step
selber
closer,
deine Perspektive
see with your own
hinzuschauen
eyes,
auf das
find your
Wunder der
own
Welt.
place and your
Und wir
own
bemühen uns eben
perspective
auch
of the
ganz
miracle
konkret,
which is the
Menschen
world.
aus anderen
We try to invite
Religionsgemeinschaften
people from other
einzuladen.
religious persuasions, he adds. Inviting diversity, this also seems to be the river's motto. Its many nooks and hidden bays, its damp and cool, hot and dry spots along its banks do just that. Along the middle reaches, the Kamp boasts an astounding spectrum of ecological niches. Where the Kamp shifts direction from east to south, its waters approach a veritable jewel of architecture, the secret landmark of the region, the Castle of Roses. The forests around the castle are a perfect training ground for an archaic feat of dressage. Monika Hiebeler is a professional falconer. Apart from falcons, she trains kites, vultures and eagle owls. But her real passion is for golden eagles.
Ein Steinadler ist ein Greifvogel, der sehr
A
persönlich
golden eagle, she
werden
says,
kann, wenn
is
man
capable of a
dementsprechend
strong
mit ihm
personal
beschäftigt.
relationship if you
Er ist
work
aber
on
nicht
it.
der Untertan,
In this relationship,
sondern er ist
you
der
treat the bird
Partner
not as a
des
subject,
Menschen.
but as a
Dementsprechend
partner.
muss man sich auch verhalten.
The falconer attracts the bird with food, but sometimes the call of the wild is stronger. This is why the Castle of Roses is also a breeding station for birds of prey. But forming nature to serve human needs is a quest that can be seen throughout the Kamp Valley. Castles and systems of defence have always been the first permanent outposts of human colonization. These ancient structures were witness to the conquest of the region by the Babenberg and Künring clans. From the 11th century on, they turned the Kamp Valley into a political axis, extending their territory northwards. During this expansion, they destroyed Slavic seats of power and, along with them, one of Austria's oldest Christian temples, the 9th century church on the Schanzberg near Gars. Since then, Gars on the Kamp has become known for more peaceful activities. Today, in spite of its picturesque castle ruins, Gars is no longer a military stronghold, but a venue of wellness. The first famous bathing guest was composer Franz von Suppe, master of the lighter musical muse. The water of the Kamp has always been praised for its softness. On its way so far, it has not had the opportunity to pick up any limestone and become hard. From 1870 on, the Franz Josef Railway brought an ever-growing number of vacationers from the cities to the banks of the Kamp. The perfect place to revel in the joys of summer. Far from the river baths, the last wetland forests along the Kamp have remained islands of calm. The rare kingfishers are rather picky about fishing waters and nesting territories. These flying jewels insist on undisturbed riverbanks and crystal clear water. In many places, the Kamp flows around huge granite boulders. Everywhere in this landscape, fantastic natural sculptures are monuments to a unique geological history. Some people see mystic magical meanings in these shapes. And indeed, a few of these boulders do hold secret treasures. Crystals of amethyst. These colourful gems have been created by a complex combination of geological whims. The Meadows Amethyst Museum exhibits some of the best pieces found in this area. And in the hinterland to the east of the Kamp, there are still more surprising traces of the land's history. Here, in a sand pit, it's not unusual to find seashells, snails, and shark teeth. These are fossils from a subtropical ocean. 20 million years ago, Meadows and Eggenburg would have been seaports. The Eggenburg Sea was home to the ancestors of many marine species familiar to us in our own day. Manatees glided through temperate, shallow waters, peacefully feeding in seagrass meadows. But then, something like a tsunami must have hit the coast. The violent wave buried the seagrass meadows in rubble and wiped out the manatees. their bodies sank to the bottom. Beneath thick layers of sand, their skeletons were petrified. 7 skeletons have been found in the sandstone. One of them can be seen in the museum in Edinburgh, amid a reconstruction of the scene that could have suddenly ended the manatee's peaceful existence. The first fossils were discovered near Koenring in 1852. Between layers of sediment was the petrified aftermath of a prehistoric cataclysm. The sandstone layers on the granite base contain many hints at the geological and climatic history of this region. Remnants of the ancient Eggenberg seafloor have been built into many houses of this area. Even the famous Vienna Ringstrasse proudly displays these materials. A few miles downstream, the art of gardening is celebrated. At the Langenlois Gardening School, specialists in orchard, vegetable and flower gardening learn and practice the tricks of the trade. The result is a fantastic garden landscape, which the students reinvent every year. They've even dug a pond and use it outside school hours. Many breeds of plants which were quite common in Austrian gardens only a few decades ago are now almost lost. A genetic database project at Schiltern is trying to preserve rare breeds of fruit, herbs and vegetables. At Noah's Ark Gardens, breeders grow traditional plants that are no longer found in the greenery markets. Not too long ago, these vegetables were commonly used in Austrian kitchens. The Ark at Schiltern has more than 6,000 plant species in its living archives. Each year, hundreds of varieties are cultivated around the Baroque pavilion. 70 types of potatoes grow in these gardens. Further down the camp, other traditional cultivating techniques are being preserved and taught. But at the little town of Elsan, an even deeper past has become the object of interest. An open-air museum offers impressions of life north of the Danube during the period of the Great People's Migration more than 1,500 years ago. Country seats like this were the basic economic units of that time. Experimental archaeology fills these reconstructed buildings with life and reproduces prehistoric techniques of processing wood and metals. These farms were self-sufficient to a large degree and produced objects of everyday use such as pottery and textiles. The people of Elsan have been acting out the local early Germanic culture in every detail, only using tools and materials from the 1st century. Old domestic breeds are raised in the fields, and traditional techniques of food production are tried and tested. Using methods of experimental archaeology, the people of Elsan test theories about everyday life in the 5th century. A regular tribal council would elect priests, political leaders and officials and deal with inter-tribal relationships. Ancient food plants are not only grown here, but also prepared according to 5th century recipes. Over its entire length, the camp runs through a zone of low precipitation. Even along the upper reaches, in the forest district, there are few places with more than 100 centimetres of annual rainfall. But when a sudden summer storm lets loose, the situation can suddenly turn dramatic. In some years, extreme weather events turned the camp into a raging torrent. The flood disaster of 2002 is just one example of the river's potential violence. Bridges were washed away, dams broke, entire villages were flooded. The towns along the lower reaches downstream from the Castle of Roses were particularly affected. It's a bitter irony that events that are seen as disasters from a human perspective can actually improve environmental conditions. Newly created gravel banks, islands, channels and bays offer new opportunities for plants and wildlife. The nearer you get to where the camp reaches the Danube, the broader and flatter the land along its banks becomes. Like a rugged miniature mountain massif, Grafenegg Castle towers over the camp's lowlands. With its turrets, bay windows and arcades, Grafenegg Castle is a motley mix of historic architectural styles. And it's exactly that which made it appear so modern in the 19th century. The lower Kamp Valley is literally studded with conspicuous architecture, from Baroque to modernism. In fact, it's the exciting marriage of architecture and wine growing which makes this landscape's special character. A futuristic realization of this idea is the Loisium wine experience. the Loisium houses a unique museum, presenting the production and enjoyment of wine in an artistic way. This wall is a monument to the very foundations of the local wine culture. It is built of loess, the soil of the local vineyards. The loess layers are built of a fine sand which was created in the Alps during the ice ages by glacial and frost erosion, carried over long distances by strong winds and deposited on the lee side of hills. Due to its porous structure, loess can absorb lots of water. Because it contains limestone, it's one of the most fertile soils. Many fantastic wines of the southern forest district would not exist without this precious gift of geology. But wine also grows without loess, as long as its roots can reach down into deep soils. Gravel soils, conglomerates and crystalline rocks will do. The land around Langenlois has an incredible variety of soils suitable for wine growing. Wine was introduced here by the Romans, and surely they must have enjoyed it in similar style. The Langenlois vineyards are known for a special white, the Grüne Veltliner. But in recent years, some reds have also gyrated in the glasses. But it's not only the quality of the soil that's responsible for the exquisite pleasures of these rolling hills. The alchemy of winemaking also depends on precipitation, temperatures, and sunny hours. All these ingredients must be perfectly understood in order to create prime quality in wines. Each location offers special conditions, allows for a different variety in taste. It's the sensitive interpretation of microclimates in the vineyards that makes a top winemaker, such as Willy Bründelmeier.
It's
very hot during the day, he says, but the evenings are chilly. The diversity of breeds and soils is enormous. Every few hundred meters, the conditions are somewhat different. Heiligenstein is a hill marking the crossing point of the Kamp and Danube valleys, Willy Bründelmeier says. Its vineyards profit from the warmth and haze of the Danube Valley. But as soon as the sun sets, cool air from the Kamp flows over the slopes, creating an extreme climatic contrast. Willy Bründelmeier believes in organic fertilizer and sustainable growing methods. To him, pesticides and other chemical products are taboo. Natural resources are intelligently used to develop the full complexity of classic wines. With the so-called lyra trellis system, the vines are raised in a Y shape on wires. The plants receive the optimum amount of light and ventilation. Well-aired vines are more resistant against blight. With this method, the amount of grapes per hectare is low, but the potential for excellent quality is enormous. Fully developing that potential, however, depends on the grower's sensitivity and inventiveness. The cellars of the Godelsberg and Bründelmeier wineries are centuries old. Carefully pressed Veltliner, Riesling and Burgundy wines are maturing in these ancient vaults, and the most precious bottles of every year's vintage are laid down in store. In many ways, the wines from these cellars mirror the soul of this landscape. These wines combine a geological heritage, a special climate, the living nature of this land, and ancient cultural knowledge into a unique sensual pleasure. The very same words could describe the uniqueness of the River Kamp and its valley. These elements make the Kamp a river which, from its very source and down to the Danube, has the power to enchant all the senses.